Once you've built core endurance, core strength and core stability, what happens next? It's plyometrics. So what we're going to talk about in this tutorial is how to apply plyometrics to the core. If you've gone through and completed my How to Build Core Strength and Stability online 12-week program, you've built that foundation of endurance, strength and stability. So what you're now in a position to do is start to take that onto the next level. And we're going to be talking about plyometrics. So we're going to talk about what it is, then we're going to look at 3 components that make up those types of exercises. I'm going to be using one exercise as an example, but the 3 principles that I'm going to be talking about can be applied to many exercises out there. Plyometrics is a form of exercise where you're, let's just say, moving a light weight fast. So you're trying to build what is called speed strength. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be using the kettlebell down here to basically talk you through one exercise where you can start building that core speed strength or that plyometric strength to be able to then take out into, or just to advance your training or take out into any sport you like. Component number 1 is the eccentric loading. So plyometrics is mainly about the eccentric loading, but what it's trying to do at a very fundamental level is trying to turn your tissues, and we're going to talk about those later, into elastic bands. So eccentric loading is maybe something that you haven't heard of before, but you all know what a concentric contraction is because you've probably done it if you've been to the gym. So this can apply to many exercises. But if we take a bicep curl as an example, when I go from this position, I'm holding a weight in my hand and I lift up, that's known as a concentric contraction. The muscle is shortening under load, so my bicep is getting shorter and lifting a load. Eccentric is the opposite, so it's when it lengthens under load. So what that basically means for my torso, so for our exercise today, I'm going to be doing I'm going to be working the body across the body. So if we take that as an elastic band, so what happens is we extend the tissues and then they whip back. We extend the tissues and they whip back. Extend the tissues and they whip back. That's what we're trying to do with plyometrics, and that is the eccentric contraction. The eccentric contraction is the bit where we pull it back so it can then whip back nice and fast. So that's what we're trying to create, because that's what's going to create our speed. And if we look at what the exercise looks like, we take this kettlebell, it's 8 kilos, so it's not a hugely heavy weight, but we don't need heavy weights for this, because the faster we move these weights, the harder our body works. So we get a great workout from light weights. So as I've mentioned, it's trying to elongate here and here. So I'm going to take this weight, I'm going to take it down to my hip, and I'm going to essentially throw it over my shoulder. Not literally, but in theory. So I go up and down, up and down, up and down. Now what's happening, as I mentioned with the resistance band there, the elastic band, as I throw it over my shoulder, I'm eccentrically loading my torso. So when it gets to an end range, I can pull it back, and I'm not only using, which is where sort of bodybuilding would be in some respects limited, because they would say, well, that's lats pulling the weight back down, where that's somewhat true. Because I'm elongating through here, I'm even elongating through the lats. So what I'm basically doing with my lats and across my torso, I am pulling it apart so I can whip it back. I'm pulling it apart fast, so I go back, forth, back, forth. So that's what I'm trying to create, is that elasticity to the tissues. And that's what the eccentric loading is all about. It's pulling apart and then pulling it back down, or whipping it back down. So it's not like a pull down where I'm pulling it under load like so. It's up and whip, up and whip. Component number 2 is it creates a platform for the spine to prevent movement. So what's basically happening is there are 2 principles of movement. One is to maintain posture of the spine. Now that doesn't mean it has to stay there rigidly and we have to move around like this. That's not true. That's not what I'm trying to get across. You can move the spine, but it needs to be done more effectively than what a curl would do, like I've described with the eccentric loading. So what we need to be able to do is create that platform. So the torso is there to, or the muscles of the torso are there to prevent that movement of the spine. The muscles of the limbs, so the hips and the shoulders, are there to create the movement. So that's what we need to try and do with this exercise. We need to create the movement from the shoulders and let this hold as the platform, the solid platform, for these to move fast. So we're maintaining that posture of the spine. The muscles are being used more effectively as more of a springboard, and then the arms are very quickly moving the weight. Because if I'm very loose through the torso, I can't move the weight as fast, and it's not as fluid. But when I get tight, I can move much faster, like so. So these exercises help fit with that principle of movement, of maintaining the posture of the spine. Also, the muscles of the torso that are there to prevent that movement, they are working more in that way. And then if we then move on to principle number 2, which is a movement is created by the limbs and the muscles of the limbs, you can see that that's what my shoulders are doing. I'm not creating the movement from my spine like a curl would, which could potentially damage my spine. It's done from the limbs, which is a much more effective way of efficient, effective, strong movement. Component number 3 is the tissues that you're working. Now, when you do more bodybuilding style exercises, like a bicep curl, like a bench press, like a pull down, you are generally putting more emphasis onto the muscle. That's all well and good in certain situations. When we start moving these light weights very fast, we are now moving from the muscle to 3 different tissues, which is the muscle, the tendon, and the fascia. So as I've mentioned, the fascial line, certainly with that exercise, if you go into kettlebell swings, you start to use the superficial back line, or the posterior chain as it may also be known. But basically we're trying to turn that whole length into an elastic band. How we do that, and the faster the movement, the more the tendons and the fascia come online. So it creates a whole system. So if we take the core, we've got the abdominal fascia, you've then got the rectus abdominis that sort of fits into that. And if we go across, it goes up into the pecs, pec minor, you could possibly even get a little bit of deltoid in there as well, depending on the position of the arm. So we've got that line that goes across. So what we're trying to do is get all of that working together, not just trying to isolate off certain muscles. It's the same with the kettlebell swing. So again, if I was to take this, again, it's only a light weight, but I come back, that's me priming the elastic band. So I'm now priming the elastic band, ready for it to let go, and it ping forward. So it's primed and then bang, and then I pop forward, primed and then bang, and I pop forward. So that's the type of exercise that we're trying to create. Because we've built the endurance, the strength and stability, we've got the position of the torso. We're strong in that position. What we now need to wrap around it is the speed of movement, which could be in rotation, which could be in that kettlebell swing, or it could be in a sort of more rotational, sort of arm rotational type of movement. But again, all the way through, we're keeping solid. So we could be rotating from the hip, we could be sort of hinging from the hip, but all the time, the spine stays in position, the hips are doing the movement because they've got the muscles to be able to do that quick movement. So to quickly summarize, once you've built core endurance, strength and stability, where do we go? It's plyometrics. What is plyometrics? Essentially, it's moving a light weight fast. Why are we doing it? Number 1, because we're getting the eccentric loading. We're creating those elastic bands, which is the most efficient and effective type of movement that we can do. What we're also doing is we're fitting with the 2 principles of movement, which is maintaining posture of the spine by using the muscles of the torso to prevent that movement. We're creating movement from the limbs, which could be the hips or the shoulders, and then we're using all of the tissues, so the fascia, the tendons, and the muscles, to act like those elastic bands to be able to prime them, store the elastic strength, and whip them back. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it gives you a better idea of where to go after core endurance, strength and stability. If you still need to build core endurance, strength and stability, just click down below, go through the 12 program, start building that, and then get ready for plyometrics after.